Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're turning our attention to, well, a really profound, but I think often overlooked chapter of Scripture, Genesis chapter 23.
It's a short one.
So short, just 20 verses, but it marks a huge shift in Abraham's life. It's got death, grief, ancient legal customs, and the very first physical possession in the Promised Land.
It really is an incredible section of Scripture.
Hmm.
And for any learner, whether you've been studying the Bible your whole life or you're just starting out, Genesis 23 is a perfect example of God's overarching plan in action.
How so?
Well, it's a deep dive into ancient integrity. It shows us how this crucial covenant step was taken through, of all things, a really painstaking and honest real estate deal.
Right. And so our mission today is to go verse by verse, really unlock that historical and cultural context so that the spiritual lessons, the patterns of God's work, the echoes of Jesus, they start to become loud and clear.
That's the goal.
We're going to look at Sarah's death, Abraham's meticulous purchase of this cave, the cave of Machpelah, and really what that first deed means for everyone who follows. But it means we have to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
We have to look at the language, the whole geopolitical situation Abraham was in. But before we unpack all of that, we always want to start with a moment of reflection, a sincere request for guidance.
So we invite you to join us in that. We're asking for the wisdom to understand these words, to appreciate the context, and to connect these ancient truths to our lives today, giving us clarity as we look at the source material.
Okay. So to really get into this, we have to set the stage, the historical context, the timeline, because a lot has happened since we last checked in on Abraham's life.
A ton has happened. There's been a major time jump. If you're reading straight through, you might miss it, but we've leaped forward by decades. We're entering a period of, I'd say, quiet maturity in Abraham's life.
So how long are we talking?
We're roughly 35 years past the sending away of Hagar and Ishmael. And importantly, about 20 years have gone by since that terrifying test of Abraham's faith.
The binding of Isaac.
The Akida, yes, in your sacrifice.
And 20 years is a long time. It means that Abraham and Sarah actually got to see Isaac, the son of the promise, grow into a man.
Exactly. It provides this deep sense of fulfillment before Sarah passes away. And the ages are so poignant because they're recorded so precisely.
Right. What are the numbers here?
Sarah is 127 when she dies. That puts Abraham at 137. And Isaac, though he's not a boy anymore, he's a grown man of about 37.
And where are they living?
They're deeply settled in the land of Canaan. Specifically, they're in Hebron, near the great trees of Mamre.
Hebron, that's a critical location, isn't it? It's not just some random campsite they've pitched.
Not at all. Far from it.
Yeah.
Hebron means something like association or league. It's one of the oldest cities in that whole region, up in the hills, but 20 miles south of where Jerusalem will one day be.
So they're established.
They're established. They've spent decades there building relationships. And that history makes this whole negotiation with the local Hittites so much more significant. They are respected, they're known, but, and this is the key, they are still foreigners.
Okay, that brings us right to the solemn event in verses 1 and 2. Sarah's farewell. Let's start with verse 1.
Verse 1 says, "And Sarah was 107 and 20 years old. These were the years of the life of Sarah."
That phrasing is so specific. 107 and 20. It's layered. Why is the text so painstaking about her lifespan?
I think the precision is highly, highly significant. Sarah is one of the very few women in all of early Scripture and certainly the only matriarch whose exact age and death are recorded.
So the text is basically putting a giant flashing arrow over her name.
Absolutely. It's underscoring her irreplaceable importance. She isn't just Abraham's wife. She's the mother of the covenant people, the vessel for the entire future of Israel.
And it makes you think of that moment, years before, where she just laughed at the idea of having a child because she thought she was old at 90.
And look at her. She lived this long, full life. She saw the covenant established through Isaac before she passed. It's a powerful testament to God's faithfulness.
But despite all that, mortality is inevitable. That's verse 2.
It is. Verse 2. "And Sarah died in Kirjatharba, the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her."
I noticed that detail, Kirjatharba, which it says is Hebron. Why give us both names?
It's like a helpful little editor's note for later readers, just confirming the location. Kirjatharba means something like City of the Four.
Mm-hmm.
But the theological point is where she died, in the land of Canaan.
In the land of promise.
Right, even though they were still just tenants, really. Her life started way back in Ur, but her final resting place was going to be in the Promised Land.
And Abraham's response is so human. He came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. two distinct actions.
The Hebrew words there give us some depth. To mourn often relates to the ritual, the inward sorrow, the lament. But to weep, that's the outward sign, the tears.
So it was a complete grief.
It was comprehensive, internal sorrow and external visible tears. This wasn't just ceremony. This is a man who had shared this incredibly difficult, faithful journey with his wife for more than 100 years.
It's what you'd expect, and I think it's important to remember that mourning is a duty. It's a tribute.
It is. It validates that natural human response to loss. But, and this is key for us as we follow the thread of Scripture, there's a balance. We see quickly that we can't sorrow as those that have no hope. The promise of God goes beyond the grave.
And that observation brings us to our first major pattern of how God works, doesn't it? The universality of death.
It's the non-negotiable reality. Even Abraham, this special friend of God, the guy who got the promises directly, he is not exempt. He has to watch death take his closest loved one.
But the rule for everyone.
It is. God's plan works through the inescapable reality of our human frailty, not just around it.
And that stark reality is what forces Abraham to shift gears from private grief to very public action. This is the beginning of the negotiation.
It's a shift we all have to make when we lose someone. Verse 3, and Abraham stood up from before his dead and spake unto the sons of Heth.
He has to literally rise up from the sight of his deepest grief.
The necessity of burying his wife compels him. He has to move out of his sorrow and into the public square.
And his choice of words in verse 4 is just. It's astounding considering who he is. I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight.
Let's just pause on that self-identification for a second. A stranger and a sojourner.
I mean, this is one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the entire region. He's a warlord, he's got massive herds, tons of servants.
And yet he presents himself this way. Why?
Was he being manipulative? Playing poor to get a better deal?
I really don't think so. The New Testament, especially the book of Hebrews, looks back on this moment and says this was his fundamental public confession of faith.
What do you mean?
He was declaring that his ultimate citizenship was somewhere else. By calling himself a pilgrim, he was saying, my real home is a better country, a heavenly one, which God has promised me. His earthly wealth was just temporary.
So every action, even a real estate deal, becomes an act of worship.
It's a testimony. That's fascinating. And then there's his immediate need to bury his dead out of my sight. That phrase is so visceral.
It is. The body of the person you loved most becomes something unbearable to look at. That urgency is what drives this whole thing. He needs a permanent, undisputed plot, and he needs it now.
And he makes this request to the sons of Heth, the Hittites. They are the local power in Hebron. So how do they respond? That's in verses 5 and 6.
He addresses them at the city gate, and that's a key detail, right?
Oh, absolutely. Critical historical context. In that ancient culture, the city gate wasn't just for coming and going. It was the courthouse. It was the public forum. It was where all legal and commercial business was done.
So this is a formal legal appeal?
It's not a casual chat. And their response is incredibly flattering. Listen to verse 6. Hear us, my lord. Thou art a mighty prince among us. In the choice of our sepulchres, bury thy dead.
They call him my lord and a mighty prince. I heard that the Hebrew for that is literally a prince of God among us.
That is the key insight. It's this incredible contrast. Abraham humbly calls himself a stranger, but these outsiders, these Hittites, they see him for who he is. They recognize he's blessed, that he's powerful, that carries divine favor.
So God has honored him so much that even the non-covenant communities see it.
That's a powerful pattern right there. You humble yourself and God exalts you. And their offer is, on the surface, very generous.
In the choice of our sepulchres, bury thy dead.
They're offering him a loan, essentially, temporary use of one of their family tombs. But Abraham knew that temporary generosity just wasn't going to cut it.
He needs a legal claim, a permanent one. And that moves us into the actual negotiation starting at verse 7. And Abraham handles this with such grace.
He opens by bowing again. Verse 7. And Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land. This is pure diplomacy. He's acknowledging their respect while sticking to his own principles.
It's such a simple but profound lesson. Your faith doesn't give you a pass to have bad manners.
Exactly. Even a prince of God has to be humble and respectful in business.
So then he lays out his specific request. He doesn't want to borrow a tomb. He wants to purchase a permanent, undisputed property.
And he names the owner, Ephron, the son of Zohar, and the exact property, the cave of Machpelah, which is in the end of his field.
And he's clear he'll pay full price. For as much money as it is worth. He's initiating a fair commercial transaction. He's setting the terms purchase, not gift.
Right, and this kicks off the classic Middle Eastern bargaining ritual in verses 10 and 11. Ephron, the owner, is right there at the city gate assembly, and he has to respond publicly.
So, verse 11. Nay, my lord, hear me. The field give I thee, and the cave that is therein I give it thee. Bury thy dead.
Ephron is following the protocol perfectly. In that culture, you just don't name a price right away. It would be rude. To seem generous and hospitable, you have to first offer it as a gift.
It's part of the dance.
It's an expected courtesy. It sets the stage for the real transaction.
And Abraham knows this. In verses 12 and 13, he respectfully refuses the gift.
He bows again, showing his respect, but he is firm. I will give thee money for the field. Take it of me, and I will bury my dead there. He turns down the gift, point blank.
Okay, this is a critical moment. Why is he so insistent on paying? It would save him a ton of silver.
I see two powerful reasons here, and they're embedded in how God interacts with the world. First, it's about justice and integrity.
He was a wealthy man. He didn't need a handout.
Right, he didn't want to sponge upon his neighbor. By paying, he showed respect for Ephron's property and labor. It upheld his reputation for unimpeachable integrity, which is, a non-negotiable for the covenant people.
And the second reason, this seems even more important for the future, prudence and title security.
Exactly. If he had accepted it as a gift, what happens later? Ephron, or maybe his kids, could come back and say, well, we only loaned it to you, or the terms of the gift were broken. They could challenge the ownership.
But by paying the full public price,
He secures an indisputable permanent legal title. This plot of land was bought. Not borrowed, not stolen, not gifted. It was his.
so he's laying the legal groundwork for the entire future of his people just by having good business sense.
A single, honest property deed is more secure than any temporary agreement.
Okay, so Abraham has refused the gift. Ephron knows that the dance is over. He names the price in verses 14 and 15, but he still tries to sound generous.
My lord, hearken unto me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that betwixt me and thee? Bury therefore thy dead.
400 shekels of silver, we need to put that in perspective. What was that actually worth? Was this a fair price, or was Ephron gouging him?
That is a crucial question. And the answer is 400 shekels was a very substantial sum of money.
Give us a comparison.
Well, if we look at later biblical data, the price of a slave was often around 30 shekels. King David, centuries later, buys a whole threshing floor and oxen for 50 shekels.
So this is not a small amount.
This is a huge expenditure. This might be the price of a very large estate, not just a small cave and a little field. So Ephron is naming a high price, maybe even an inflated one, knowing Abraham is desperate and rich.
But he wraps it in that polite language. What is that betwixt me and thee?
It's sophisticated commerce. He sets the price high, but frames it as a minor detail between friends. This gives Abraham an opening to haggle, but Abraham, he doesn't take it.
He doesn't hesitate. We move right to the end of the transaction in verse 16.
Verse 16, and Abraham hearkened unto Ephron, and Abraham weighed to Ephron the silver, 400 shekels of silver, current money with the merchant.
Let's break down the mechanics of that. The text says Abraham weighed the silver. Why that specific verb?
Another vital historical detail. We're before the time of standardized coins. Currency was usually silver bullion lumps, bars, rings. Value was determined purely by weight.
So he had to get out a scale right there at the city gate and weigh it out in front of everyone.
Exactly. It required accuracy and public verification. No hiding anything.
And the phrase current money with the merchant, what does that guarantee?
It guarantees its quality. Silver was often mixed with cheaper metals, so current money with the merchant means it was high purity, tested silver that was acceptable in trade. So Abraham paid the full weight in the best quality currency he could.
And this action, it's the perfect expression of that theological principle you mentioned earlier.
The principle that dominion is not founded in grace.
Explain that.
Even though God had promised Abraham the entire land through grace, Abraham still had to act with complete, scrupulous honesty in his earthly dealings. His spiritual title to heaven didn't give him a free pass to cheat someone on earth.
That's a deep lesson. Our spiritual standing doesn't excuse us from integrity. It demands more of it.
It does. God requires justice in the here and now. Abraham paid his full earthly due, even though he held a divine title deed to the whole country.
And the transaction was made completely ironclad. Verses 17 and 18 read like an ancient legal deed.
Look at the detail. It secured the field, the
Yeah.
cave, and all the trees that were in the field that were in all the borders round about.
Why specify all the trees? That seems so meticulous.
Meticulousness was security. They specified the trees to close every possible loophole, to make sure no one could come back later and claim that Ephron still owned the fruit from the trees or something like that.
Every single thing attached to the land was part of the deal.
It was all done publicly, in the presence of the children of Heth, before all that went in at the gate of his city.
That repetition just hammers home the legal certainty of it.
It was a perfect, undisputed, permanent transfer of property. The very first piece of the Promised Land belonged to the covenant people forever, secured by an honest deed.
And the final act follows in verses 19 and 20, the burial.
Verse 19. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah. And verse 20 confirms it again. And the field and the cave were made sure unto Abraham for a possession.
The deed is done. The grief is addressed. Sarah is at rest. But this brings us to the real theological core of the chapter. We have to ask the big question. What is the significance that the first piece of the Promised Land Abraham secured, not by war but by full payment, was a tomb?
And this is where we have to shift our perspective. This is where we start to see the deeper patterns, the connections to Jesus. It is, I think, the most powerful insight in all of Genesis 23.
Okay, let's unpack that. If the whole land was a gift, why was the very first piece a paid-for grave?
I see three interwoven themes here. First, there's the cost of inheritance. Abraham paid this huge price, 400 shekels, to secure this possession forever. And that worldly transaction is a type, a pattern of the necessary payment that's required to secure our eternal spiritual inheritance.
The promise of heaven is free to us, but it wasn't free.
It was purchased at an infinite cost, the full payment made by Christ on the cross. The high price of this cave foreshadows the ultimate price of redemption.
The inheritance requires a complete and honest purchase. Okay, what's the second theme?
This tomb represents hope and resurrection. I mean, why go to all this trouble for a permanent purchased family burial place? On one hand, yes, it's a memorandum of death. But the meticulous care, the permanence, it signifies an unshakable belief that the body matters.
He was looking forward.
He was looking forward, believing that the body, resting in this secured plot of land, would one day rise. It suggests the body is simply resting in hope.
So the burial plot isn't just a place to hide the dead. It's an anchor for faith and life after death. And what about the long-term impact?
That's the third point. This becomes the seat of possession. This one cave, the cave of Machpelah, became the permanent resting place for almost all the patriarchs and matriarchs. Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah.
It's the family plot.
It is. And it wasn't a fortress or a palace. It was the place they committed their very flesh to the soil of the promise. Without raising a single sword, God's people established their foundational, undisputed legal claim to the promised land.
It's a guarantee, secured right in the face of death. A silent, powerful declaration that the land would one day belong to them, anchored not in force, but in a property deed.
It's a masterful piece of divine strategy. It shows their ultimate claim rests not on political power, but on an eternal plan that includes mortality, resurrection, and the faithful transactions of daily life.
And it's so interesting. Abraham, the pilgrim who was content to just keep moving his whole life, he insists on securing this one permanent, fixed spot.
Because where they were buried spoke volumes about where their true hope was. He was focused on the eternal, and so he anchored his earthly actions with incredible precision and principle.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. Abraham secured this place forever, showing his belief in a greater home by how he handled this final earthly business deal.
So we have to ask ourselves, are our transactions today in our business and our relationships, are they securing a reputation and a foundation that demonstrates our own belief in a greater eternal inheritance?
How does your conduct as a sojourner here reflect the hope you hold for your true permanent home? That's a powerful point of reflection. Let's briefly review the main insights from this deep dive.
We saw Abraham's incredible mix of humility, calling himself a sojourner, and absolute integrity, insisting on paying that full price of 400 shekels of current money with the merchant.
He set a standard for commercial honesty, and we analyzed how God strategically used this, this seemingly mundane event. The purchase of a tomb, done through rigorous legal protocol, gave the covenant people their first permanent, undisputed foothold in Canaan.
And finally, we uncover that profound theological meaning, that the first covenant property being a burial place is this powerful, silent symbol of resurrection hope. It reminds us that life's end isn't the end, but the beginning of the eternal promise secured by payment.
It's a remarkable 20 verses. It really is. Thank you for taking this verse-by-verse exploration with us.
Thank you. May the lessons of Abraham's integrity and foresight really resonate with you in your daily life.
We'll close this deep dive now with a final prayer of reflection, just asking that the wisdom we've uncovered takes root in our understanding.
Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, may you walk in integrity, live as a hopeful sojourner, and keep your eye fixed firmly on your true eternal possession.